What's the most awkward thing you've had to address with an employee that nobody prepares you for? Before we get started, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and turn on the bell so you don't miss future videos. Thanks for the support. Had a women's conference in-house, and one of our male staff members had a very stiff problem. Uniform was khaki pants, so it was very visible, and we had guests bring it to our attention. Next story, I had an older guy that would pee himself without noticing. Since he did it so often, he also didn't notice the smell or the feeling of the wet pants. Or he just ignored it. He was a good guy who performed well, but after having to remind him multiple times to wear and change his diapers, or telling him, also multiple times, that it's unacceptable to walk around the office with wet pants, we had to let him go. Very strange having conversations with an otherwise successful and functioning man about the fact that he needs to wear his diapers when he is in the office. Next story, body odor, yes, worse. Explaining why a white employee making a rude joke to another white employee who has black children was unacceptable. She did not understand why these jokes are not okay at all, and really doubled down on the "I didn't know his kids were black." She did get fired, and hugged me, more like hung on to me for dear life, begging me not to fire her. Next story, not me, but an intern once sent a screenshot of something in his camera roll to our group Slack message and forgot to crop out the row of junk pics along the bottom. My boss had to have that talk, thank the Lord. Next story, had a young woman that was hired for an office position go out to lunch on the Monday of her second week of work and get absolutely annihilated blackout drunk. I was the one who discovered the situation and informed my boss, the president of the company, who took over from there. Long story short, my boss had to drive her home while giving her the "you're terminated" talk, while me and the shop guys pulled her car off the curb. She drove over and high-centered it on. We had another female coworker ride along, just for precaution, but there's practically 0% chance this woman remembers any of this anyway. Turns out her background check had only partially come back during the onboarding process, and she was awaiting trial for her third DUI, for which she was very likely going to serve jail time. Her fiancé came to pick her car up the following week. No words were exchanged other than him saying, "I'm so sorry. I thought we were done with this. I genuinely hope she's doing better these days." She was, outside of that instance, a fantastic human and employee by all quantifiable metrics. Next story. So, when I was 20, I started working 24-hour shifts in fire. I didn't know it at the time, but I had developed a deviated septum and couldn't smell much of anything. Running calls in the heat was generating BO around hour 18, but I was oblivious. Even when I did a smell test, I couldn't perceive a smell regardless of what time it was. A partner finally told me, "I can't tell you how appreciative I was. I couldn't fix something if I didn't know there was a problem." I'm not saying it's easy to approach or that everyone will take it well, but I want to invite you to see it as an act of service for your employee. I think it being difficult to do makes it an even greater service. Next story. Walking back from lunch with my direct report. Beautiful day, good vibes, everyone happy. Heading up to the office, she abruptly brings up that her dad abandoned her and her mom when she was little, and how she has no relationship with him, has no idea who he is, and how his absence has negatively impacted her life in so many ways. Yeah, they definitely didn't cover how to navigate this minefield in the manager training video. Next story. I had a guy working for me that had a drinking problem. Never on the job itself, but on Mondays he would be out sick way too often after having openly partied all day Sunday. Next story. Wonderful person and great worker, but he regularly had his crack out. I had to gently remind him of the importance of professional attire, appearance, and suggest wearing a belt. I'm lucky that he's a good dude, and made that conversation as least awkward as is possible. Next story. Admin assistant had a meeting with her child psychologist on speakerphone while sitting at the reception desk. Her kid is autistic and violent. Took her aside to have the "don't do that" conversation, fully expecting her to have an emotional breakdown. She was strangely upbeat about it. Next story. Personality disorders. I'm talking individuals with diagnosable personality disorders. They can be unprofessional to the point to being cruel. They take zero accountability and act like the victim that you had to give feedback on their behavior. One example, this person was jealous a coworker with similar skills and would complain when the coworker got an assign she wanted. One time, she broke into his desk, took his personal handwritten diary, and spread copied pages about his love life struggle. Well, I pipped her, only because HR wouldn't let me fire her. The pip said, 1. Be professional, and 2. Don't steal other people's stuff. She cried and said she was the victim because her skills weren't recognized, and she was better than him. I said I don't see that she had been unfairly treated, and the pip stands. She literally stopped talking to me, like run away in the hallway if she saw me. She was failing her pip. She complained to HR. HR shot her complaint down. She tried to take FMLA. That failed. Then she would tearfully tell other offices that she was the victim of some conspiracy and needed a transfer. Everything other than, I'm sorry and it won't happen again. Eventually, I was given a green light to fire her. Then, she wouldn't take the 2 months of free pay as severance. It was a firing. Our company does a freebie 2 months pay to sign paperwork not to sue. She sued us. A year later, she got roughly the same deal minus lawyer fees. As an epilogue, she was also fired from the next job. The Podcast Manager Tools has an episode, You're Not a Psychologist, that provided so much needed sage advice. Next story. Decades ago, I finally got my first corporate position. Unfortunately, at the time, I quite literally had nothing to my name. I mean, I had nothing. The clothes I went to work in were donated, and they were also about 2 sizes too big, and I tried to pin them or sew them so they covered more of my chest, but sometimes they fell lower. I tried to mitigate this with a cardigan, but again, I had nothing to my name and was living paycheck to paycheck. Well, apparently, 4 of the women in our department, including my 2 direct managers, which sat right behind me in a long row of cubicles, had an issue with my attire. Instead of speaking with me, they had their boss do so, a man who was as graceful as he could be when he pulled me into his office to raise concerns about my dress code. I held in my tears and kept my face as neutral as possible throughout the entire discussion, agreeing to his statements and so forth. But I burst into tears when I reached the restroom and cried as silently as I could throughout my lunch break. A colleague and somewhat friend at the time found me. I told her what happened, why it happened, begged her not to say anything, and I'm grateful she didn't. She loaned me $100, and I bought 6 shirts, which covered me more to my style anyway. She saved my self-esteem and my job, most likely. My senior manager eventually found out why my wardrobe was so limited, and he pulled me aside to apologize. Wished that I had told him, but I was so ashamed at the time and didn't want to. He was kind in his warning and didn't advertise the incident to the team. My female managers didn't take that care though, but he set them straight. I appreciated that. Flash forward 25 years, and I've actually seen this in other people. My own life humbled me. Next story. I have a situation like this, body odor, that several other employees brought to my attention. I spoke with my supervisor, who attempted to develop a dress code. We don't have one other than professional dress, that would provide me with some written guidance to point to when addressing the situation. The dress code policy development was actually shot down by HR, so I've been ignoring it. We were told by HR to just limit proximity between the employees. I feel that the employee with body odor has a lot of potential with certain public-facing aspects of the role, but I don't feel comfortable putting him in that role because of the body odor. I would welcome any suggestions on how to address this issue, but it sounds like in my situation, I just am supposed to ignore it, based on the guidance from leadership and HR at least. Next story. Had a girl do something stupid to draw her second letter. She comes in my office, obviously on edge. As I was talking to her, she just starts bawling. Not crying, full-on bawling. She reaches down, opens her lunchbox, and pulls out a chicken drumstick and just shoves the entire thing, along with about a pound of her own hair. I figured that would snap her out of it, but nope. She just keeps choking herself with the chicken leg. Hair, no hair, doesn't care. She's sobbing inconsolably, but it really doesn't matter because now she's trying to talk to me while continued to shoves the chicken. Finally, she gets a bite of it, mashing it in with her hair as she chews. Yeah, psych hold. It worked out for her though. She came back and felt like trash, and I just waved it off and told her that everyone struggles from time to time, and I was just happy we could get her the help she deserves. She was trans, and calling her parents was rough. They had disowned her, and she got into trouble at work and everything just came crashing down at once. She still works for the company now, albeit in a different spot in the same department as me. She seems like she's doing great and I'm proud of her. Next story. One guy came into my office to tell me he was on the point of a breakdown and was worried the anxiety was harming his heart. Of course, we gave him support and paid time off to go get help, and he became a fantastic employee. Had 2 employees about to punch each other in the face. De-escalated and eventually got the conflict resolved. Had one guy who would fall asleep in his chair, so much so we had to wheel him out to an ambulance on his work chair because we couldn't wake him up one time. I think he was a drinker. Had one guy that would moan and complain about the job, but would never resign or look for something else. Next story, drinking and inappropriate comments. Expected conversation. In a daytime environment where kids and significant others were present. Unexpected place for things to go south. Next story, why you shouldn't show a Muslim woman who is asking for ideas on how to make extra income, Feet Finder, OnlyFans, and then introduce her to what a sex toy was. And for context, the reason she needed extra income was because she was always out or on LOA, so maybe come to work consistently would have sufficed. Next story was a first-time manager in my early 20s at the time in a small office with only 8 people, all women including myself. This young guy started and was just a little off. As soon as he started, we all started noticing drops of pee on the toilet seat lid almost every dang day. Some of the ladies started monitoring who went in and out of the bathroom and narrowed it down to this guy, tried to be nice about it and addressed it in our weekly huddle, asking folks to be mindful and check the toilet seat when they're done to clean up anything. Kept happening. Made signs, including on the wall inside of the bathroom door and on the wall at eye level directly in front of where a guy peeing while standing would be looking during such an act. Unsuccessful again. Kept happening. Had to bring him in my office one-on-one and address it point blank with him. So awkward. But finally stopped happening and learned a big lesson that day. Adults are really just bigger, professionally dressed toddlers. Next story, I had to coach a 50-plus-year-old grown adult on how to process emotions from feedback they received from a task they were assigned. Apparently, until they worked under me, they never had any substantial criticism, negative feedback from something they worked on. Next story, I had a guy working for me in Asia. He divorced his Western wife and took up with a Korean girl 20 years younger. He was a mediocre employee. He came to me a few months after the split and asked for a 20% raise. Totally out of raise cycle. I explained that, his last 2% raise, and his low performance. I then made the mistake of asking why. My girlfriend is so expensive, the judge gave my house to my wife, and I have to pay XXX alimony, which was like 45% of his pay. He ultimately could not afford to live in Korea, and I sent him home. The GF didn't follow when she found out he was broke. Similar stories for 3 other 50-years-old dudes that worked for me. Asia was a homewrecker. Next story, I was on the receiving end of a really awkward conversation with my manager. He sat me down and told me that a complaint was lodged with HR after I was overheard saying I was trying to mess up all my coworkers. I did not want to mess up any of my coworkers, and I was mortified. My best guess is that someone overheard me complaining to a friend on the phone, at a 5-day work retreat, that I was being harassed by a coworker, and that I might have flippantly said that I was not trying to mess up all my coworkers. Anyway, took about 2 days before I could look at my manager after that. I literally hid in another wing of the building for 2 days. Next story. I had an obese employee whose belly hung down below his shirt. He of course had it tucked in for his interview and first couple weeks, but then he started leaving it untucked and letting it hang out of his shirt. It wasn't just a little. This was belly button and several inches of flesh below it. This was a customer service role, and the complaints started rolling in, and I had to have a talk with him about making sure his belly was tucked in and not showing. He took it okay and fixed it for a bit, but then started letting it happen again a couple weeks later. Luckily though, he punched a wall in front of a customer, and I let him go before I had to talk to him about his belly again. Next story. We had an intern who, for his final project presentation, something very technical, he decided to name the project in a way that the acronym was BUTTASSAULT. It was all over the slides. Next story. Hey, direct report, married, trying to get promoted. You need to be more cognizant of appearances and stop hanging out and flirting 24/7 with other direct report, also married. Because everyone thinks you're having an affair. Next story. I found an employee living in an abandoned part of the office. He had a whole bed set up under the cubicles, separate space for his TV and PlayStation. It clearly had been going on for a while. Basically had to tell him he had to move out. Tried to tell me he just crashed there sometimes when he worked late. I let him think I believed him. Next story. I am a 52-year-old female, operations manager of a transportation company, auto body shop. Most of the drivers are actually independent contractors, but part of their lease is to represent the company in only a positive way. So even though I am not technically their boss, employer, I still have to make sure that they are abiding by the rules of their lease agreement and maintaining professionalism and safe driving. I do have some employee drivers, internal office workers, and of course, mechanics in the shop. And most everyone calls me mom at some point, because that is what I walk around sounding like. So I do say a lot of mom phrases, but there are some conversations that I would have never imagined that I would have to have with adults. These conversations are almost exactly how I said them. It's still awkward to have to discuss things like that. I put my mom voice on and spit it out, and it seems to ease the awkwardness. Please stop rubbing your breasts on people's cars when they aren't looking. I just watched you do it on the security camera before you walked in. If anyone other than me catches you doing that, it could cause all of us huge problems. And it's just weird. Stop it. Every vehicle we have has cameras. They work, and I have to review the camera's events daily. Please stop changing clothes in your vehicle. I already see enough of you. Every vehicle we have has cameras. They work, and I have to review the camera's events daily. Please don't urinate so close to your vehicle. I already see enough of you. I received a complaint from the gas station manager down the road, and the manager texted me this picture. Shows driver picture. Please quit stopping there to relieve yourself beside their dumpsters. They are complaining that it's starting to smell. There are some even worse conversations than those, but you can see a pattern. Next story. I had to take a grown man in his 50s into our store bathroom after he used it and left a mess streak on the toilet seat. To clarify, it was left from his dirty butt cheeks. He had done this multiple times since he had started working there. I was notified he left another present for us. I immediately pulled him into the bathroom and as calmly as possible say, "This is the last time you leave this restroom like this. I have had multiple complaints. Here is the bleach." He started to say something like, "I didn't make a mess." I walked away and said, "No more talking about this. It's done." Next story, HR. Doris sent the VP of HR an email and accidentally copied David because he is the first person in the address book. He needs to unread that email. It contains confidential HR material. Apparently, Doris and VP were having an affair. Doris married, VP not, and Doris was visibly pregnant. David wisely swore ignorance of the email. Systems said the email did not exist, as it had been double deleted. That was David's last day as the first person in the address book. But telling David to unread something was uncomfortable. Next story. I once had a guy destroy his pants and the restroom with explosive diarrhea. He then had to make the walk of shame, find me, and tell me he was going home to change. To this day, I still recall he was back in 10 minutes. Next story. Body hygiene, odor, sexist remarks, political views, accusations of theft, drinking on shift, drug use by my boss's son. I feel like I've covered it all, but of course, never say never. Possibly the most awkward. I used to run a company that ran work camps for oil and gas companies. Very remote, and staff lived on site, 3 weeks in, 1 week out, and had a female housekeeper get drunk and roam a 20-person dorm completely naked. Male workers, fearing for their relationships and accusations, locked themselves in their rooms. I was 500 miles away and had to talk staff through how to deal over the phone, as well as talk down the client, and convince the client to have one of their people drive her back to the nearest town, 3 hours away the next day. The next morning, I had to convince the woman to leave her room and get in a vehicle. So that was interesting. Next story. I'm a young female office manager for an all-male handyman home improvement crew. I've had many issues with the guys requesting personal details, attempting to add on social media via my phone number from the group chat, and other more explicit things. I had to explain Snapchat and why this made me uncomfortable being alone with some of the men in the office to the owner of the company. Owner is a very religious older male that completely adores his wife and could not comprehend why these men would reach out to me. Most of them are married, so now I have office cameras and led a team meeting about workplace respect and harassment. Next story. I had an employee whose grandchildren would often visit our office after school. One day, one of my other employees came into my office and told me one of the grandchildren had left period blood all over the toilet seat and left some bloody toilet paper on the floor. She insisted that I, a man, needed to deal with it instead of her or any of her other female work friends. So, I had to call her grandmother into my office and have a very uncomfortable conversation with her. She was mortified and couldn't believe the ladies in the office went to me instead of talking with her directly. Next story. One of my married employees was having an affair with one of my single employees. I found out because they would call each other on their respective off shifts and talk for over an hour on a line they both knew was recorded. I saw the call durations when doing a Q&A check and reviewed them thinking they had an issue with and could use some coaching. My management refused to let me talk to them individually. They were afraid of the embarrassment and getting sued, so I addressed it as a hypothetical to my entire team. That was fun. It went something like, "Hey guys, last thing. I would like to remind you that calls take on your work lines are 100% recorded, inbound and outbound. Since they are 100% recorded, they are 100% a part of our company record. As part of our company record, they are 100% able to be obtained by outside sources via subpoena in the event of a lawsuit from a client or even a divorce attorney. It is in your best interest that you do not make or take personal calls on that line." Everyone, except 2 wide-eyed employees, looked very confused. Next story. I once had a direct report, male, complain about the cleavage of a very pregnant coworker whose clothes were becoming increasingly tight. The most ridiculous part of this scenario is that the complainant often wore a Cradle of Filth t-shirt featuring a topless woman. This was in a creative studio 20 or so years ago. It was a different time. Next story. Well, I took a vitamin on shift one day, and someone saw me take said vitamin. I was reported and had to take a drug test even though I showed them the vitamin bottle. That was wild. Next story. Not a dress, but your boss and your boss's boss having an affair with each other while both married, and then trying to justify it because it wasn't specifically spelled out in the company handbook. Next story. I had a direct report tell me they don't like the way I sign off emails with, "Let me know if you want any more information." So now I creatively think of ways to remix it. So far I have, "Give me a shout if it's unclear," or "Any questions, let me know." Next story. Directly confronting one of my direct reports when she decided to begin spreading lies about me in our conversations. Had to bring in 2 other individuals, one as witness, and the other to validate she was lying. I hated every second of it. Next story. I had a guy at a tech job who just never got it. He was older than me, but not like elderly. He would sit too close to women and put his face close enough that we could feel his breath while trying to train him. That was uncomfortable, obviously, so it made it hard for me to want to put people in that awkward situation, but then also hard on me to feel like he had the support he needed to get through his job. Yes, we discreetly discussed with HR, but it was hard to want to assume bad intent, so it was hard to change things. Eventually, I put him on a PIP and really tried to get him there, but the progress just didn't materialize. I asked HR to be with me when we fired him, with severance, because I knew he would be emotional and I would as well. During this meeting, he told us his doctor thinks he has early onset dementia, and I feel terrible about that, but if he had revealed it earlier, maybe there was something that could have been done? To at least get him some accommodations, or find a different position in the company or limited standard that would give him more runway to figure things out. This company, despite shortcomings, was known for amazing benefits, so I'm sure he could have gotten more support if he had just been more forthcoming. The reason that this sticks for me personally is my husband and I bought a house right after this, and I learned it was on the same street he lived after the fact. His house went up for sale shortly after we moved in, and I just have to live with this reminder that I hired a guy for a job, had to fire him, and upended his life. Next story. Oh boy, this just happened to me last week. I had to have a discussion with someone about how their infected leg wounds smelled so bad that it was literally making people vomit and have to go home early. She couldn't smell it and didn't believe me, then left crying. Came back the next day and it was even worse. Had to repeat the conversation with my boss and HR in the room. We will see what Monday brings. I hope she got the medical attention she needs. Next story. Employee changed genders and then thought that meant they could be very, very not professional in communication. Hitting on coworkers, wearing inappropriate clothing, talked about sexual things, etc. Then other issues pop up, like they are going to rehab for drugs. Reports from other coworkers they are doing adult content streaming during work hours. Missing work and lots of performance issues. Formal reports to HR from other coworkers. More spiraling out of control from the divorce since apparently they blindsided their spouse, and more issues. But HR wouldn't do anything for fear of lawsuits. Coworkers found their Amazon wish list filled with toys and inappropriate mess. So I then had to address it with more people and tell everyone to keep things professional and related to work. Self-harm comes up. HR wants me to deal with it alone since that's a manager's responsibility. Told them no. All of it was extremely awkward, and it took 18 months from the gender transition till they got fired. Next story. I wasn't the one having to address it, but I had a coworker in the cube next to me who farted near incessantly, and I know there were multiple complaints. It didn't stop her, and she went on to complain about a smoker who smelled like cigarettes after she'd come back from a smoke break. The audacity. Next story. I had to tell another manager's assistant to shower and change clothes before coming back to work. She often bragged about picking up men at the bar and enjoying naughty activities all night. On that day, she came to the office smelling like sex, booze, and cigarettes, and one of the partners could smell her from his office. Her manager was a man and didn't want to have a conversation about her lack of very personal hygiene, so I was nominated to do it instead. I had never and hoped to never again talk to another woman about her rank-smelling special place. Next story. Not my story, but my old boss at a dog kennel, who I later became friends with after I left, told me he once had to tell an employee to wear a bra at work. He really didn't want to do it. He was worried it would make him look like a creep, but it was necessary for safety reasons. You gotta have everything either strapped down or tied back when working with animals. Next story. For me, it's quiet quitting, because you have to explain the level they were at and the level they were at now. Quiet quitters don't think there's a punishment until you fire them. Next story. Body odor for sure. But some people are neurodivergent, and I have had to address social no-nos like creepy behavior or overcompensation for a talking to about said behavior. I think you're pretty, but I don't mean anything sexual about it because that's wrong. Paul, no. Most of the time it's not reading the room or taking being relaxed too far. So then, what do I see? It's my dog running out the doggy door with the entire rotisserie chicken in his mouth. Oh man, there went dinner. We had to order Chinese. My dog was run over by a car. Paul? No. Next story. I had your experience. I had to send someone home to bathe and change clothes. Yes, they were rank and had worn the same clothes the day previous. I still felt bad for them. Next story. I had a guy whose job it was to ride around with clients to go over roadway maintenance issues. So he would ride in their trucks with them all day, day after day. I had the client tell me the guy stinks to high heaven, and they refused to ride with him until and unless he addressed his issues. That was a fun conversation. Next story. Had to explain to a 70-plus-year-old male teacher about why it was offensive that a male student told a female student she smelt like fish. I also had to tell him to Google WAP. Not on the work computer. He was such a lovely, sweet, gentle man. I crushed a part of his soul that day. Next story. I had to talk to a woman about her taking nips of vodka from a hip flask in her drawer throughout the day. She said it was water. I asked her to give me the flask to smell. It was not water. She was fired the next day. Next story. 19-year-old kid cashiering at a campground accepted a beer from someone in a car and drank it right there in uniform. I am not sure I handled it well. He and his cousin both ended up quitting. Next story. I had to ban a coworker from my cubicle. She was talking to me while pulling out a strand of her own hair and then proceeded to floss with said strand. Next story. Had a guy on my team joining the Teams meeting without any blurred background. You could see his underwear on full display on a drying rack behind him. I had to awkwardly tell him people didn't really want to see that. He was surprised and slightly offended. The first sign he wouldn't do great in our corporate environment. Next story. Had a guy who would send caustic emails late at night. Figured out it was after a few drinks. Told him that we have a no emailing and drinking policy. Delivered the message sort of joking, sort of serious. It actually helped. Another time, I had a guy in my team who was so mad at another guy on another team, he wanted to fight him. Keep in mind, we are in finance. Finance. You know, very professional. I had to use every ounce of influence training to get my employee to chill and figure out a working relationship with the guy. Next story. Very, very similar situation. Thankfully, they didn't have an issue with their breath, but their body odor was intense. Turned out their hygiene was fine, but they had a significant magnesium deficiency. Our conversation prompted a doctor visit that helped them in the long run. Next story, adult films. It was admin at the time. We had filters that told us where people went on the internet for safety reasons. Several employees, different issues. 1. Like clockwork, logged on for the day, adult films until lunch, leave for lunch, back from lunch, adult films until he wrapped up at 5. Awful thing was, offending guy's wife worked in HR, so had to report him to his own wife with the exact evidence and site list. Awkward. 2. We were a 24-hour shop. One guy from the B shift would video with girls at night. Again, had to give that evidence to HR. 3. We tracked resource usage. Employee's account is taking up a lot of space. Why? Saved adult content in their work domain folder. 4. Last but not least, same as number 3, but illegal content. Reported that one to leadership for obvious legal reasons. Senior went and talked to employee and told him to delete that mess, not realizing it was evidence. That was the straw for me. Senior manager didn't take the appropriate action, effectively letting this guy get away with what I considered seriously illegal, and I left. I was just one person on a large IT team, so others were left to deal with things. Stop looking at adult film at work. Next story, a coworker who smelled like drugs. Her jacket stunk up the shared closet staff used to store belongings, and restroom smelt like marijuana after she used it. And besides body odor, people who fall asleep at work. Next story, remote worker, F, on video call would show up to calls in a strapless dress. She looked naked all the time and would angle her camera weirdly. Young kid too, had to have an uncomfortable conversation about professionalism. Next story. Oh, you just reminded me of my first awkward management conversation on just this topic. The gentleman stank and had lice in his hair. He was employed as a music teacher in a unit for children with emotional and behavioral issues. You can imagine their response, as they had all been kicked out of mainstream schools. It was not too bad in the cold, you just stayed upwind. But then the hotter weather hit, and oh boy, the whole classroom became suffused with this stench. Then we noticed the lice. I had to talk to this guy and said he needed to change into clean clothes and sort out his hair. He denied there was a problem, and I had to say, oh yes there is. That conversation was 30 years ago, and it was so embarrassing. Next story, we have company vehicles, which are allowed for use after hours for personal use. And one of the new hires was in the middle of relocating to a new residence and got into a motorcycle accident on a weekend. They ended up voluntarily resigning due to the injuries. Nearly lost both of their legs. 2 people on street bikes speeding on highway, got the death wobble and crossed lanes, smacked into a sedan. But we were tasked to retrieve the work vehicle from the house of the friend who owned the bike they were riding, which was full of personal property from being in middle of a move. Anyways, after clearing out the rear of the vehicle and taking it back, we found their bag of, personal items in a plastic bag along with a bottle of lubricant which had leaked everywhere under the stowaway seat empty space. Like weeks after, my direct boss, who was with me, looked at me and said, "Do we report this? What do we do?" He ended up throwing away into a gas station garbage can. The former employee never contacted us about the missing bag, but we didn't expect them to do so. I wouldn't have. The next meeting we had to address, clarify, and inform the team that while they're allowed personal use of vehicles, that the vehicles should be maintained in regards to company policy and kept clean, and a proper representation of the company if they're involved in an accident while driving the company vehicle. So be mindful of the contents you're traveling with. Next story, I had to address this twice. Both times the dudes had no clue that they smelled rank. In both cases, they didn't realize you have to change shirts and you sweat in them. Next story, had a girl with daddy issues that would harass literally any guy in the warehouse. Having to repeat back to her what she said and confirmed by witnesses was definitely nothing you prepare for. Next story, I had to address Bo with an employee last week and I was mortified. They took it well and have since been better about it and more self-aware, but I have never wanted to address something less. Next story, I didn't have to address it as I wasn't the manager, but someone a few workplaces ago was arrested for illegal, and the FBI came to our work and took his computer and everything. I'm sure the manager convo was not pleasant. Next story, my son worked for me. He asked the optometrist, who also worked for my practice, to step outside for a moment. He then told the OD that he needs to clean up, use deodorant, and put a clean shirt on. It worked. Better than having a woman boss tell him. Next story. I mean, that does sound tough, but there absolutely are courses that prepare you for that. Difficult Conversations is one of the most common and basic management courses. Next story. My most awkward interaction was my report came in late multiple times in a consecutive weeks. Normally I don't question, and all I ask is that I get a courtesy message so I can move resources around accordingly. This time I asked what's going on. The reply was my report and her husband get intimate, and her husband goes multiple rounds that last hours. I wish I never asked, cause every time she comes in late, it's all I can think of. Next story. One guy, who was not openly gay, hit on another guy who wasn't gay at all. Second guy got so freaked out, he started talking about harming himself. I had to bring it to the attention of management because guy 2 was in the field at the time, and no one knew if he was serious. Awkward. Next story. Laying off the same person 3 different times in 6 weeks. Worked for Doe. New rule came down that no staff aug for specific roles. The group he supported wanted him real bad and tried everything to keep him. Called me throwing a fit like it was my decision or choice. Next story. I had an employee that would wear inexpensive vinyl-type shoes, ballet flat style. She didn't wear socks or anything with them, and they would stink so bad. She'd take them off under the desk and she couldn't smell them, but everyone else did. Had to talk to someone else about bad body odor. Next story. I had to tell someone that if she was going to add paper to the copier, requiring bending over, she should not 1. Wear a thin cotton skirt, or 2. Wear thong underwear. Next story. My boss told me to walk by my team member's desk and check if I smell substances on her. People were complaining that she smelled of substances. I just come to work and mind my business. But yeah, she smoked before coming to work and they had to talk to her. Next story. I once had to sit in on a termination of a woman that was drinking a water bottle full of piss at work and talking to customers about the wonders of what piss does for the skin. Next story. I had a conversation with someone why they were coming in on Saturdays when we were a Mithafung office. They weren't billing time, but I came in on a Saturday because I forgot something at my desk and they were there. It was a warehouse position, so sometimes people could use the space for stuff like cutting some wood or washing the car. He was watching TV and surfing the web. Turns out he was living in his van, and we would all leave for the day. He'd drive around the building and wait 30 minutes and come back to the office. It's a dicey one. The book says nothing about it. And also, who cares? He was a good employee, but also spending the weekends in there? Next story. During my time running ops at Amazon FCS, it was the number of times I had to address women and their whale tails. Of all ages and body types. Always reported to me by other women. Go figure, LOL. I always made sure to bring a second person, preferably a woman, but a lot of women just wouldn't realize that a warehouse job involving you to stand, bend, squat, reach on repeat would cause your panties to peek out. Most took it in stride and it was no big deal. One of the few times I was tripped up is when one young lady responded with, "So do you want me to take my panties off or what?" She was mainly exasperated because she was annoyed at the other woman who reported her, but I definitely stammered and adamantly said no while frantically looking over at the HRA. Next story. I used to manage young. They routinely pretended not to understand what was work appropriate. I would say, "Do not discuss sex or other topics at work." Another adult worker confronted me for discussing sex with them. This person sincerely believed that saying, "Don't discuss sex," was engaging in explicit conversation and grooming. When I asked how I was supposed to shut down inappropriate topics, they said I had to let them discuss it. I stated I felt harassed and uncomfortable around those discussions. Eventually, they went to HR, who was like, "What? Of course she can say don't discuss sex if there is inappropriate conversation happening." Next story. I'm currently stuck in the middle of a good cop, bad cop routine with my manager, top bloke, and assistant manager, two-headed snake. The assistant manager is using workplace mobbing tactics to drive me out, basically telling coworkers to spy on me, report me, call me when I'm on break, etc. I'm a heavy vehicle driver, and this puts me in breach of fatigue management laws, and he can be in serious trouble for encouraging it under core law. Manager is trying to defend me, but the more he calls out the assistant manager's poor handling of things, the more the assistant manager targets me to try to get back at me. Next story. Had to talk to an employee because a coworker complained that the employee hired a guy to always use the bathroom after my coworker did to take a massive mess, trying to make everyone think that my coworker had these huge, sloppy mud pies. Next story. One of the smartest guys that I ever met spiraled into looking like a homeless person. Dental tartar to the point you couldn't see the whites of his teeth, unruly beard, and body odor. Customer thought he was a homeless person when we wrote him up. Next story. Managed a coffee shop. We had a new employee that the other baristas kept complaining about his horrible farting. I asked him to stop taking so many espresso shots during his shift. One day he came to my office and unfortunately asked to go home as he had soiled himself. Next story. I wasn't a manager but worked with a smelly employee with really bad beau. He worked in a small team of approximately 5, which gladly wasn't me. The smell was that bad. When they worked in the conference room, they had to wedge the door open and put a fan in to blow the smelly air out. This was 10 years ago. I'm still baffled how he didn't know. Next story. Being drunk at work. 2 different employees. I was raised by an alcoholic, so I feel like I have a great deal of sympathy and empathy for them, but the line is drawn where others could possibly be hurt, or I'm going to lose my job because they mess up royally. Both of them had to find other employment, and I hope to God it was a wake-up call. The other weird thing was one of my employees was in the warehouse alone on a high lift. The battery died, and they didn't have a walkie on them, so they decided to climb down a couple dozen feet of slippery, oily chain and metal. It fell over and smashed into a bunch of pieces and hydraulic fluid all over the warehouse floor. When he came out to tell me, he was white as a ghost. The part that really got me, even though I never fired them for what was probably a $30,000 to $50,000 bill, was when they told me, I tried to catch it. Next story. I feel like the hygiene conversation should be done by HR, because then everyone on the team can pretend they know nothing about it and keep things from becoming awkward. Next story. I had an employee tell me he got his girlfriend pregnant. He was from out of state and doing a gap year with a nonprofit before college. He told me he wanted to see how I would react to help figure out how to tell his parents. Next story. Explaining to a senior executive that making fun of their partner in update emails and making fun of the vegan in the workplace at a lunch weren't exactly appropriate behaviors, and then having to explain in small words why. Next story. Tell the team to not leave skid marks underneath the toilet seat. I had 2 shifts worth of people tell me because I have to report to my management team. Next story. I had to tell an employee he could not sleep on the job, in the cubicle next to me, his boss's boss, for prolonged periods of the day when he was expected to work. He was snoring and everything. Next story. Had to deal with a complaint from one member of staff about another member of staff's package. That was an incredibly awkward conversation. Next story. A technician who reports to me reported instances of bullying to me. I had no idea what to do with this, except go to HR. Luckily I did, since the HR manager informed me that once I became aware, I was legally required to bring it up with HR, and we're required to handle it. No idea how, but we had to. Next story. Had to tell an employee that their clothes smelled like cat pee. I know you love your cats, but maybe leave your clothes in the dryer until you're ready to put them on for work. Next story. I had a woman who wanted to make sure everybody could always see the top half of her admittedly very nice breasts. She dressed like the office was a nightclub. Fortunately, my boss was a female, and I was able to dump the problem up the chain. Next story. Had an employee that fell asleep in every meeting he was in. Wouldn't go to the doctor to check it out, and I eventually had to fire him, but we had multiple conversations about it, all of them uncomfortable. Next story. The amount of times we had to address someone's thong showing above their pants, or worse, butt crack in our large call center, was unhinged. We eventually went to uniforms. Next story. It's always women. Always. Either they have poor hygiene, big girl problems, or they show too much cleavage. If we can see the nipples, the shirt doesn't cover enough. Again, big girl problems. Always took a partner. Just for clarity, not talking about seeing nipples through the shirt. I'm saying the nipples and cleavage were just in the face. Always would say, what is good in the club isn't good in the workplace. Next story. I had an employee who has the smelliest feet. So bad, we worked at a luxury hotel in the housekeeping department. I had to follow behind her and spray air freshener. We ended up buying her new shoes, and within a few weeks the smell was back. Then she got pregnant and started having body odor issues as well. Thankfully, she called out sick too many times and was let go. I wonder how she's doing now. Next story. Worked as a volunteer coordinator in a nursing home and was the first one in that position. The only volunteers at the time were a few people who did religious services. They had been there for years, and there wasn't much oversight. All new volunteers needed background checks, so the admin wanted me to run checks on the pastors as well. One, awkward to ask for because they'd been there long before me or my boss started working there without incident, and I'd never met them as they were only there on weekends. Two, awkward to receive the checks because one of the pastors came back with 3 felonies, one of which they were still on probation for. Someone high up in the company told me to get rid of him, so I, as a 31F, had to meet this very pleasant 60-something man for the first time to let him go from his volunteer work that nobody had had a problem with before they made me run the BC. My boss and the priest who originally let him start years before were there to back me up, but I had to actually say it. Next story. I had to address a bathroom issue. The employee kept going number 2 and not flushing. We only had one bathroom because we were a very small store with only 2 employees in the morning shift. Me and said pooper. Next story. I had to tell someone to stop looking at adult content at work. He was young, had young kids. I told him he was lucky the owner wasn't there, or he would have probably been fired. I put him on a 6-month probation. Awkward. Next story. Had a woman start at work, and about a week in she had her period. I knew this because I went into the bathroom when only she and 3 others were working, including myself. We are all in menopause, so I knew the blood on the toilet and floor was from her. I had to ask her to go clean it up and ensure the bathroom didn't look like that again. Just gross. Next story. I was in the middle of the super low-rise jeans era. My manager had to have the nice, awkward conversation about how when I squatted down to reach things on lower shelves, my jeans exposed my butt to all who cared to see. I was hilariously embarrassed and never wore those again. But honestly, glad someone told me because I was oblivious. Next story. The body odor issue is often deeper than the employee starting to bathe regularly. If their clothes and furniture are embedded with the odor, it's no hope. We have a new employee who smells like cat pee. No one will hang their coat up near hers or her. The small office smells awful. Supervisor has bought those automatic air freshener things. Now it smells like ocean breeze cat pee. Next story. Someone at work kept leaving mess on the back of the toilet seat. I had to send out a company-wide email asking everyone to make sure they wiped all fecal matter off the toilet when they were finished. Next story. One of my staff's scrubs is stained and in a horrible state. Yet it's her favorite pair. I've had to tell her she cannot wear them anymore, but offered to buy her a brand new pair of her choice. She wore them again yesterday, when I was off, without taking me up on my offer. I don't want to have to write her up over something so silly. I hate that I'll have to address it again. Next story. Another situation. I was manager on duty, in our facility, and had to send a housekeeper home for being intoxicated. It was heartbreaking because I know she's going through a lot of stuff. She did end up getting terminated, but fortunately, I wasn't the one who had to do it. I think about her a lot and hope she's doing okay now. Next story. One of my field sales guys decided that pleasuring himself during an all-hands Teams call was a good idea. Unfortunately, he hadn't remembered to check he'd turned off his camera and microphone. He hadn't. Because there was about 200 people on the call, I didn't immediately notice. One of my team immed me because the guy wasn't responding to their WhatsApp telling him to turn off his dang camera. I removed him from the conference, just as the host said, "There seems to be some background noise from someone's machine. Can you all make sure you've got your microphones on mute?" We had to fire him. He was great at his job. He'd been with us a long time, and his behavior historically was very good. That one incident was literally the first time anything amiss with him had ever occurred. It was the first time that he'd been caught red-handed anyway. I probably would have given him a written warning if it was left to my discretion. However, the office tattletale had noticed, screenshotted, and naturally forwarded the whole lot to our MD, with myself and the rest of our senior management team, CCD. So he got sacked. Gross misconduct, termination without notice, and effective immediately. Snitchy Susan didn't remain one of my staff for very long afterwards either. I don't care how good someone is at their job. Don't pull that mess with me. I won't manage any troublemaking, trouble-causing team members. Next story, that you can't use your sick leave to propose to your girlfriend. Direct report told me all the plans for the proposal weeks in advance. and then was like, "So I'll take a sick day that day. Is that okay?" Next story. I worked in wind energy. Had an incident where a team member took a mess in the turbine 100 meters up in the air. It happens a lot. But he didn't clean up after himself, left it there over a long weekend, and the work crew smelt it the next week. Didn't know where to start that conversation. Next story. When I was a soldier, I had to counsel a subordinate about the poor quality of her writing. We both belonged to an MOS that demanded a soldier write well. It was a terrible session. She broke down crying, and I felt like a terrible bigot. Fortunately, I was saved by her indomitable spirit. 2 years later, she showed me her college degree for English. Next story. We had a guy with Bo, and it seemed like he was taking a shower regularly. He would go to the gym in the morning and show up with wet, showered hair as he arrived. Yet his pits were so strong it filled the room. It was almost awkward because everybody kind of knew, but what could you do? Well, it turned out this guy was in a terrible situation at work that he was put in by management. It was a no-win situation, and he was very stressed out. Stress causes all kinds of changes in your body, cortisol, pumping, etc. Well, after he got out of that situation, guess what? No more stinky pits. Next story. I hired a young woman 2 years ago. Well-spoken, well-dressed, eager to learn. She started wearing such strong perfume, making it really difficult to have a conversation with her without getting a headache. Then it got really weird when she started leaving her desk and sitting herself in an empty partner's office. She was hired as the most junior-level staff. When I asked her why she moved to an office, she said there is no one in there anyway, and she wanted to sit closer to our team. I said, "That isn't how it works. You need to sit at your own desk." She said, "Okay." Next day, she is sitting in the office again. I asked her to move back to her desk, and she did that day. Then the following day, she is back in that partner office again. I confronted her, and she just shrugged and said, "It isn't that big a deal." I fired her. Next story. An employee filed a complaint saying another coworker was farting on purpose to annoy her. Turned out she was not farting, but reheating and eating broccoli at her desk for lunch. Next story. Had to explain to a 29-year-old woman how to eat a balanced diet, hygiene, and a proper sleep schedule because she was constantly calling in sick and falling asleep at her desk and super greasy and unkempt. She had already been yelled at by the director, and I was told to get her in line or she'd be fired. She had only been eating things like chicken nuggets and fries, and would be up every night until 3 a.m. gaming. I was her team lead, but 3 years younger, and felt crazy having to walk her through 3 square meals a day, the importance of vegetables and drinking water, brushing her hair, and 8 hours of sleep. She was extremely sheltered, and kind of a shut-in, and was totally blown away that people needed these things to function. Because she had been fine all this time, she didn't believe me until she went around asking everyone else what their routines were like. We all had to remind her that she wasn't really fine if her director was threatening to fire her for her behavior. It took some time, but 6 years later, she's still working in our field, so she got there. Next story. I agree with deeper medical issue. Our IT guy smelled so bad, lots of complaints. Then he passed by himself. My mom was manager at bank. She had to talk to employee about body odor. Turns out she had breast cancer and passed away. Next story. I started addressing body odor on day 1 of field training. Please make sure you stay on top of hygiene and washing your uniforms. A lot of us rotate these cars, and after a long shift we are going to smell. It's happened enough in the past, and it's awkward to talk about. Please stay on top of your hygiene. Seems to be easier to talk to them later down the road in comparison to someone who's been on the job 15 years, and everyone is afraid to say something. Next story. I once had an employee tell me my employee in the cube next to them was crop dusting every time they walked by. I had to explain to a 40-year-old man that, unless he has some undisclosed medical issue, farting near his coworkers is inappropriate in an office setting. Next story. We had a bulimic, anorexic employee who would purge in the bathroom and leave a mess on the toilet and stall. I was the one chosen to speak with her. Next story. Body odor in a retail farm store. I took the advice of a more seasoned manager, called the individual to my office, and simply put a thing of deodorant on the desk and told them they need to use this before they come to work, after they shower. Message received. Next story. My managers are always having to tell people about their pungent odor. One of the managers I complained to about a new member of staff the other day tried telling me it's because of their diet and their culture. When I pointed out, well, how come none of the females from that demographic stink? He just looked at me, sighed, and said, "Okay, I'll have a chat with him." Next day he came in with a brand new coat on, and he didn't stink at all. Next story. Not as cringe, but still difficult and awkward. I had to tell an employee that customers couldn't understand their accent. The tough thing was, they spoke English just fine, but were from another country with a very different accent. I felt very bad, but wanted them to be aware that customers had mentioned it. Next story, body odor. Also had an employee stealing things, so I left the room, then went to the CCTV room, and he was pleasuring himself. I had to go back to the room and immediately tell him to get his stuff and leave. I couldn't look at him in the face. Then I had to call him back in and tell him why I had to fire him when I could face him. Next story. We had a really great employee who worked in the warehouse and would come into the accounting office's bathroom to do the deed and essentially leave a bomb behind. At first, we tried leaving room spray and wipes and a little sign in the bathroom before having a conversation, but eventually, I just had to talk to him. Best way to go about it is to be fast and direct and acknowledge the awkwardness, IMO. Next story. I had a team lead. Due to company changes, we suddenly needed a group of Spanish speakers for South Florida and Puerto Rico, and I was the manager of a group of about 25 people. One team lead spoke Spanish, and the racist one did not. We had never had a Spanish team before in the building, and it was nice to hear more people speaking their native language, even people that weren't on my team. About 2 weeks in, I start getting complaints about the racist team lead, who was an over 40-something white woman who had worked there as a top performer for over 10 years and then got promoted to team lead. She assumed they were talking about her when they were talking about work, and she tried to tell them that they couldn't speak in their native language, although it was specifically used for work. I told her she couldn't say that, as I sat within earshot of my teams and heard nothing bad from the floor. I speak Spanish too, although I'm a white woman myself, married a man from PR. Eventually, she was being so rude and mean to the team that my English and Spanish speakers were complaining about her. I had to let her go for being too racist. That's really what it came down to, as she was overblowing situations and had a victim mentality. Strangely enough, my company tried to deny her unemployment, and I got to sit in on my first legal hearing with a judge. She didn't break policy necessarily, so she was paid the money, though she did break code of conduct through her behaviors. Next story. I worked at an all-inclusive resort up north in Minnesota. The staff lived on site in staff cabins. A few of my dining room server staff called off pretty regularly. Coincidentally, they were a couple. He claimed to have had gastrointestinal issues, and she claimed to have hormonal woman issues. At one point, she had called off for about 3 days, breakfast, lunch, dinner shifts, for a total of 8 to 9 shifts. When I asked about the excessive call-offs, she admitted that she very recently had switched birth control, and it threw her hormones out of whack. Normally, I would think this is a pretty reasonable excuse, but she was so freaking full of it by the time she dragged that excuse out, I couldn't believe a thing she said. There was obviously nothing I could do about it, but she was adamant that was her reasoning. I'm like, I don't care what your reasoning is. Get out of here.